Hello! So today we are taking a look at the Black Square Piston Duke in Microsoft Flight Simulator. We're going to work through starting the aeroplane up, and then we're going to fly over from Gladstone in Australia to Rockhampton. So without further ado, we're going to jump inside the cockpit and we're going to work through a procedure I've written up to get the aircraft up and running. I'm not going to follow it to the letter because I've put lots of keyboard shortcuts in the procedure to help people out that may not know their way around the aeroplane. But I think once you do know your way around it a little bit, it actually makes sense to use the camera and move it around because then you get more context of where things are. So first thing we're going to do is go into the tablet and go to the payload section. And make sure you've got some fuel, obviously, but then make sure the exterior elements are out of the way, so the wheel chocks, pitot covers, and so on and so forth. And then we will also make sure the doors are closed, so you've got the nose baggage and the cabin door. So you can see, if you look around, that they are closed, which is all good. And once you've confirmed all of that, you can go and get rid of the tablet. Next thing I'm going to do is remove the control locks. So you just click on them, and then you should find that you have free movement of the controls, which is always good. And make sure the throttles are working, that you've got the correct controller mapping in place. And make sure all of the controls are moving around. Okay, that's all good. Okay, so first of all, we press Control 9 to go down to the floor. We make sure the fuel selectors are both pointing to the on position. In other words, if we don't do that, no fuel will get to the engines and we'll have a bad day. Okay, so then we press Control 4. And the nice thing about pressing Control 4 actually to come down to these switches is it removes the yoke for you. And then when you press F again, the yoke comes back, which is quite cool. So we're going to go and put the beacon light to on or up. Ready, so when we go press Control 6 to come over to the left side bank of switches, we can turn the batteries on and then the beacon light obviously comes on. Immediately we have power inside the aeroplane. Okay, so I'm working through my checklist. I will make it available as a link to download in the notes of the video. So the next thing we're going to do is go and make sure the cowl flaps are fully open. Now we've already seen outside that they are. They're electrically actuated and they're really slow moving and very quiet, and there doesn't seem to be a way of knowing where they are from within inside the cockpit, which is a bit odd. But you can very quietly hear them, or hear those motors when you hold the switches. Anyway, so the cowl flaps are open. So we're going to get on with starting the engines then. So I'm going to try and do this from this view, because it will give you more context of where all the switches and things are. So we're going to go propellers to max, mixtures to max. So I'm doing this slightly out of order from the checklist, but it's fine. We're going to go and we'll do the right engine first. So the right pre-oiler needs to go on for about 30 seconds or so. If you look over here, you'll see the oil pressure. Whoops, if the sim didn't freeze on us, it chooses its moments to do this, doesn't it? It will unfreeze. There we go. It will unfreeze. So you'll see the oil pressure slowly rise. It will go up in notches. I think that's a simulation thing from Black Square. I very much doubt the real thing goes up in steps. But you just need to wait for that to climb. It says 15% in the instructions, so we'll just leave that doing that. Also, we need to have the fuel pump on. So if you read the instructions and do this by the book, you will turn both the pre-oiler and the fuel pump back off before starting the engine. It doesn't seem to make much odds, so I'm going to leave them on, because if you get a failure to start, you end up having to go through the whole routine again. So I'm just going to leave them on. It doesn't seem to do any damage to anything. Okay, so then we crack the throttle open. So we'll crack the throttle open. It says 1/2 inch. It can be very, very, what's the word? Recalcitrant to start the engine. So we're going to fish around with the throttle while holding the starter on. So we're going to go to both magnetos and then hold it on start for quite some time. We could exercise the throttle while we're here. So we're going to fish around for the right amount of throttle while trying the starter. And again, you might want to just stop it for a moment and go again. There we go. It does seem to be hitting 0 throttle and bringing it up. Does seem to trigger it quite often. Okay, so once you've done that, you can put the generator on the right engine. You can turn the pre-oiler off, obviously, and turn the fuel boost pump off for the moment. And you want to target about 1,000 RPM on the RPM gauge here on the right engine, just for it to warm up. Okay, so we do the same for the left engine. So pre-oiler to the left side, fuel boost pump on the left side. I've played around with switching these off to see if it helps the engine bite. It doesn't seem to. So we're going to move the view slightly so we can see everything. So pre-oiler's on, boost pump is on, left magneto to both, advance the throttle, and keep an eye on the PSI, make sure it's got high enough. So we'll leave it a little bit longer and then we'll go for it. Again, exercising it does seem to help sometimes. It seems to be rare that you get it to bite first time. There we go. There is no kind of rule to it, it's just a question of feel, I think. Okay, so we've got the engine running, pre-oiler can come off, fuel boost pump can come off, generator can go on. And we target, again, 1,000 RPM. So we're looking at the RPMs up here, so a little bit more on the left engine, just while it warms up. Okay, so we've got the engines running, we've got the generators on. So I'm going to scroll down through several pages of how that looks written up. It looks far worse written up than it is in reality. So post-engine start, we're going to go back down to Control 4. We're going to do the nav external lights, turn them on. Then we're going to go over to the side panel again. We're going to put the avionics to main inverter on and then avionics master switch on so you can see various instruments come alive when you do that. Oh, I pressed the wrong button there and pulled the map up. So then we can go over to the radio stack. So press Control 3 and I've turned all of these on. By default in the aeroplane, they're all on by default. So I've turned them all off and we're going to just go show you where the switches are for them all. So it's just the volume switches basically. We're going to put the weather radar into standby mode for the moment. We'll put the DME to nav 1. ADF's on, so they're all looking good. So while we're here as well, then we'll go and configure the nav radios and some of the instruments. So also while we're here, actually before we do that, let's go to Control 5. Which is on the co-pilot side. You've got the cabin pressurization and temperature. So if you're going to be flying above, say, 8,000 feet, you would want to pressurize the cabin. We're not going to, so we won't worry. But we will do auto cool on the temperature system because it's a lovely warm day in Australia, and we don't want to cook ourselves in the cockpit. Okay, so Control 1 will take us over to the primary flight instruments, so we can calibrate the altimeter. We can calibrate the HSI, the directional gyros. We don't really need to in this aeroplane. We can double check that we're using the correct HSI source. We can set a altitude for our altitude pre-selector for our target altitude for cruise. We'll fly at 5,000 feet over to Rockhampton. And then I guess we can go and put the navigation in place on the Nav 1. So you can see we're going to use the Rockhampton VOR to navigate by because we don't have GPS in this aeroplane. I've configured it that way. We could have had GPS, we're not going to. So we want 116.90 for the Rockhampton VOR. So 116.90 and switch that to active. And it won't show up just yet, but we can go and pre-select the heading and the course. So the course is 296 degrees. So we'll go and do that. It's about there. And to take off, we're taking off runway 28, so we'll set the heading bug to 28. The reason for doing that is we're also going to go down to the, or before we do that actually, let's go down, lower down here. There's a pitch trim. That switches on the autopilot's control of the pitch trim so it can control attitude. So then the actual autopilot itself is back here at the back of the pedestal, so it's control 8 to get back here. We're going to be using heading and attitude mode, so when we do turn it on, this roller will control pitch. Okay, so preparing to taxi. In order to taxi, we're going to pull the mixture back to lean. I'm not going to do a run-up test today. And then we go and turn the taxi lights to on. And it might be nice to put head tracking on at this point. So there we go, we have head tracking. So come off the parking brake. Increase the throttles gently. And we roll out. If you're doing everything by the book, you'd do a brake test at this point as well. We're going to hope the brakes are going to work. So yes, as I said, this is Gladstone Airport. It's the Orbex version of it. It's very good. Or it's the version that Orbex make available. I don't think they built it. So we'll have to backtrack slightly on the runway because the taxiway doesn't go all the way down to runway 28. Again, if you have a search on my channel, you'll find the video where I had a proper look around Gladstone. All the interiors are done, it's really nice. All the nearby roads that have been created in quite some detail. Even the cargo terminal over on the other side of the runway is really nicely done. Let me just look where I'm going. That's the trouble, while you're rubbernecking, looking around at scenery, you tend to go weaving all over the place at the airport. Okay, so we're going to turn around shortly. So you can see the lines here help you guide the aeroplane to a point at which point you can turn around. So we'll do it here. We'll get ourselves lined up. Okay, so we've got maximum on the propellers, fully rich on the throttles, sorry, on the mixture. We're going to go and turn the weather radar to on now. We could have done some of this while we were taxiing, it's pretty much up to you. We should have had the transponder in standby mode already, so we'll just wait for that to fire up. It doesn't take long, and put it into alt mode. And then finally on your lights over here, you're going to go and put the landing lights on there. You're going to put the beacon down to beacon and recognition, and the nav down to strobe and nav. So we go and have a quick look outside at those lights. You can see we're pretty much ready to go now. So the only things to really be careful of, I'm just going to center the view up to make sure it's correct, is the manifold pressure and the RPM. So obviously you're going to go almost full throttle for takeoff. So we're going to ease the throttle forwards. Keep an eye on that manifold pressure because it climbs really quickly when you get up near top revs. Okay, so we stay within limits on the manifold pressure on the takeoff run. We're taking off without flaps because we've got a lovely long runway. So we get to about 90 knots without flaps. You can hear just got the stall warning as we were coming up, so gear up. Trim the aeroplane to just climb on its own for a moment. You can see the nav radio is now kicked in. We've picked up the signal, but it's wandering around. So you do get signal degradation in the Black Square aircraft. It's really nicely done. So we just continue climbing out in a straight line. You can see we've wandered off axis a little bit, that's fine. We're not doing an airmanship example today, we're just looking at procedures. So if I wanted to now, I could go and turn the autopilot on, so we'll do that. So autopilot is on, I use the button on the yoke to do it. You can see it's in heading and attitude mode, so it's holding attitude. We're actually climbing quite steeply. So let's go and, I'm just going to turn head tracking off so we can concentrate. Let's go and wind that roller forwards a little bit and you'll see the vertical speed react. So then we're also going to pull the RPM back, so you can see the RPM dropping there. Don't want to pull it too much back. In cruise you'll look for about 2000 RPM, but during climb we can hold on to, you know, just keep it in the green area. So we're happily climbing out towards 5,000 feet, so let's go and turn towards our eventual course. So we're going to move towards the course we wanted into the VOR at Rockhampton, sorry. So the autopilot is obviously following that because it's in heading mode. And we're off on our way. You can see the DME is counting down the miles now, so 46 miles to run to Rockhampton. So I'll carry on recording till we get to our cruise altitude. Because obviously once we get to cruise altitude, we're coming up, we're already through 3,000 feet, so we can be leaning the engines out already. So it's lighting up to tell us we're within 1,000 feet of our target altitude. If we were commercial traffic, we would leave the landing lights on below 10,000 feet, but we're not commercial traffic, so we're going to turn them off. Taxi light obviously can come off as well. How are we doing? So just coming up, you can see the autopilot is now winding out that vertical speed as we approach the target altitude, and obviously we'll start to accelerate. We can pull the RPM back to 2000 for cruise. It's probably good enough. And again, manifold pressure is up to you how much fuel you want to burn and how fast you want to go. So once you get experience with a given aeroplane, you'll be able to play games with that. So once you're in cruise, you can also go and turn on prop sync, and it will just make the aeroplane that bit more efficient and less noisy. Okay, so rather than me sit and waffle on about a load of inconsequential rubbish for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to pause the recording until we're a bit closer to Rockhampton. Okay, so we're cruising along 5,000 feet. We've tuned the engine out for cruise, and you can see the plane is whistling along at nearly 160 knots. It's a quick aeroplane. Okay, so I'll pause recording. I'll see you in a minute. Just unpausing recording, I just realised as I paused it, the one thing I haven't done is close the cowl flaps. So I'm going to close them. Once you're in cruise, you can go and close them. So you can see here how slowly they go. That one's closing. Look how slowly the electrical cowl flaps close. So I'm holding the button on the whole time we're doing this. And we'll close the other side as well. Yeah, completely forgot about that. That's one of the big problems of talking about something and doing it at the same time. You tend to deviate from your checklist, and then you're all over the place. So I think it's 10,000 feet is the transition altitude around here, so we're going to leave it accurate to the ground during the flight. Anyway, I'm going to pause now. So with 37 miles to run, back in a few minutes. Okay, so we're about halfway over towards Rockhampton. I thought it might be interesting to have a little look at the autopilot while we're on the way as well. So obviously we were in heading mode. We put ourselves broadly in the right direction. There's hardly any wind to deal with. But what we could have done is gone for nav mode. So switched over immediately, and you can see the aeroplane's banked immediately right to intercept the CDI, or the course deviation indicator on the HSI, or horizontal situation indicator. Aeroplanes have so many acronyms for things, don't they? All we're basically doing is pulling ourselves onto the course. So you can see at the moment we're slightly off to the left on Navigraph, and we're coming in closer to the course. Okay, so along the way we may want to start descending. So it's fairly flat all the way out to Rockhampton. There's some hills over to the right of us, we don't need to worry about them. So let's go and check the altitude or elevation of Rockhampton Airport. So we've got elevation 36 feet, so we'll drop down to 2,000 feet while we're en route. So we'll go and set 2,000 as our new altitude target. And to get there, all we need to do is set attitude mode, and we can just pitch the aeroplane forwards a little bit. You can see the vertical speed is picking up. You just need to be mindful of airspeed, so we're going to pull the power back as we descend. So we can push forward a bit more. Obviously the airspeed and the vertical speed, you need to balance them to a certain extent. So I can put a bit more power in to maintain 160 knots-ish, or thereabouts. But we're fine. So we're coming down just under 1,000 feet a minute, about 800 feet a minute. Obviously we can play games with that to come down a bit steeper if we want, just move this roller a little bit further forward. Okay, so obviously we can put head tracking on as well and have a look around at the scenery. It's a beautiful part of the world, this. Especially on a sunny day, you can see forever. This is live weather I'm running at the moment, but I have wound the clock back because it's the middle of the night in Australia while I'm recording this. So we've changed it for daytime, just so you don't have me groping around in the dark looking for switches and buttons. So RPM's at 2,000, manifold pressure, obviously because we're still descending, we've lowered the manifold pressure, lowered the power essentially. So when we get closer to approach, we'll go back to higher RPM, fully rich as we come through 3,000 feet, so we're getting there now. So I'm going to increase the mixture back to fully rich. And we're 13 miles out from Rockhampton. So you can see we're approaching. So we'll go for runway 15. So if you wanted to see a diagram of Rockhampton, let's open the normal airfield chart. So that gives you the nice numbers. So if we were to fly 330 degrees, we could almost do that now, which will put us on a reciprocal. So if we go back, we can click these lights. I think in the real thing you can't. You have to go back down in the cockpit to do this. So we're still dropping down to 2,000. So we could go back to heading mode. Heading mode is broadly the direction we're going anyway. And then we're going to change the heading to 330. Was it 300 or 330? Let's just double check that. So the runway is actually 328 degrees, but yeah, we'll do a right turn. To the reciprocal of the runway. And we're just going to fly a box pattern to come in, to keep it nice and straightforward. If you look on the map now, you will see we are now flying out this way, and then we'll turn in and come in. This does take us closer to the hills, so we'll have something to look at along the way, which which is always nice. So as we're getting ready to approach, we're going to go and reopen the cowl flaps. That just helps with it helps the airflow through the engine, so once you are running at higher RPM, higher power levels potentially, and once you're on the ground, it will help airflow through the engine so it doesn't overheat. So let's have a look and see if that's opened. Guess it has. What about the other one? Oops. So just waiting for that to open. Notice what I said about them being so slow to open. Okay, so we're down to 2,000 feet. So I'm going to open the throttles back up gently. We won't increase prop RPM just yet. We'll wait until we're on finals to do that. So we're flying perpendicular to the runway, or not perpendicular, to the reciprocal of the runway direction. So we'll put the course marker on our instruments to 148 degrees, just so we got some visual reference of the runway direction compared to us. So it's obviously going to be the exact opposite direction that we're going. So it's going to be about there. So that's now the runway direction. Notice we haven't got ILS here though, but we do have the VOR. So you can't see it while that's in place, can you? So, and it's just offset, so if you're a long way out, you could still use that on the correct course, and then you'd obviously get visuals as you come over the river here maybe, and make your decision point. So we're now alongside the airfield, so if we look over here, we should see it, it's over there. It's worth having a little look at the runway layout actually. So if we open that chart again for Rockhampton, we can see, yeah, the main buildings are turn off left from the runway then when we come in. So again, this is all going to be done visually. I'm just going to move my seat forward slightly. So there's the airfield. Okay, so we talked earlier about increasing the RPM when we get closer to landing, so we're going to do that now. But also pull the power back. Yeah, we're going a bit too hard on the RPM there. It's very tricky with head tracking to do this. I'm going to turn it off, because your head moves at the same time you're trying to drag the levers. That's probably about right. So let's come off the autopilot. We're going to fly reciprocal. But we're going to cut across basically onto our base leg here. Let's put the head tracking back on. It's being a so-and-so, isn't it? So we're now flying base. We can go and put those landing lights back on. Look at the map, just for your benefit, so you can see where we are. We're just coming along across the top, and then we'll turn in for approach. How are we doing on height? So we're coming down to about 1,500. See the runway over there. So go for flaps. Let's have a look from outside, see what the flaps look like. They're quite big, aren't they? So gentle turn towards finals. Put the gear down. And begin descending slowly. Began that turn a little bit too early, but oh well. Obviously, if you were flying a proper approach, you would have more markers to go by, but we're not. We're just going visually today. So I can't remember if we get Pappy lights at Rockhampton. I think we may. A little bit too far out to see them yet. I'm just decreasing the power because with the flaps down now, even though we've only got 50% flaps, it's slowing us down to such an extent we're actually getting near stall speed. Yeah, I think we have got Pappy lights. We're a little bit low, so we'll stop descending for a moment. Can only just see them at the moment. There we go. So we're looking for 2 whites and 2 reds either side of the runway, but it's quite difficult to see them against the backdrop. Obviously we're flying visually, so we don't really need them, but it's just nice to know that you're on the correct glide slope, isn't it? It's all a huge judgment game, isn't it, in visual flight rules, aviation. Obviously it's nice when you get Pappies and things like that to guide you in. So I'm going to come down steeper than the glide slope appears because I'd rather like to get to the end point. Beginnings of the stall warning there. There we go. Wheel brakes. Are we going to make the exit? Not quite. So we'll double back here and go for the next one over here. So flaps up. Some interesting aeroplanes in here. A Chinook and some sort of UAV parked next to it. It's a really nicely done terminal building. Obviously GA planes wouldn't normally come into the terminal building, so we're going to turn off the landing lights now. Taxi lights should be on. Should have had that on for landing, really. Let's go and park at the terminal so we get to have a look at it. Rockhampton. It's really lovely, isn't it? Well modelled. Okay, so parking brake on, and then I'm going to turn off the head tracking to do this. We're going to go and turn everything off basically, so mixture can come back to shut the engines off. It'll just starve them so they roll to a stop. The taxi light can come off now, beacon light can come off, nav light can come off. Excuse me. The pitot, interesting, did we not switch them on? I thought we did. I must have missed that on the checklist. Normally you'd be running with pitot and stall heating, but it was a lovely warm day anyway, and the rulebook basically says if you're above 4 degrees you really should have them on for takeoff. If you're above 4 degrees then you don't need them on anyway. And we'll go and turn off the heating system. It's saying that this is cold, so we can go and basically turn everything off around the aeroplane that we turned on. So it's not really rocket science. And then, so they're already off. The generators can now come off. The mags can come off. The cowl flaps are already open. We'll leave them as they were. The inverter can come off. The master avionics power switch can go off. And the master battery can come off. Okay, so things, it's quite interesting, this airplane. All sorts of things work in it that you'd expect to work, really. We can open the tablet. We didn't look at the tablet in flight, but that's, I guess, a subject for another video about seeing the engine data. So engine condition 100%. We've looked after the aeroplane wonderfully, which is good. And there's the electrical system I was talking about. That schematic is really handy when you're trying to learn what influences what. But we want to go in and just open, well, we can put the static elements back in place outside. We can open the cabin door. We can come down to the aeroplane and see about leaving. It does clip at the door, so we can't slide through the doorway as we sometimes might, but we can see it from this side, and you can see the static elements there now as well. So you've got the wheel chocks in place, and the pitot covers, engine covers have been put on. So yeah, it's really nicely done, isn't it? Right, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you found that interesting. I think the only thing we slipped up on there, where I deviated from the checklist, which is the perennial problem of trying to walk through these things for people, is I missed the pitot heats. But other than that, I think it was fairly complete. And again, the conditions may always dictate that you do things differently, and as you learn where things are around the aeroplane, you could obviously deviate from the by the book as long as it's safe to do so. But yeah, what a wonderful aeroplane. So I love the Black Square aeroplanes. There's just so much to do in them while you're flying along. I think that's what makes them half the fun that they are. So I'm going to leave that there. Hopefully you enjoyed that. As I said, I'll put a link to the procedure in the notes of the video. See you again soon.